Good afternoon, GCSE students. How are we? So I just want to introduce myself first and foremost. My name is Rich. I'm from Sidekick. Well, basically, I am Sidekick. I built this myself and done all the analyses of all the past papers for you guys, basically so I can give you a bit more of a steer in terms of like what to revise this year. Okay, that's really, really important. Feel free to use the chat. Obviously, there may be a slight delay because this is live, but if you've got any questions as we go through, please kind of just get in touch via the chat and I can help you out. So what are we going to be doing today? Well, like I said, I've analysed all the past papers, okay? All the past papers. I've been doing this for like nearly 20 years now, something like that, working in schools, colleges, private tuition, kind of working for online or building online courses and things like that. So what I've done now this year is worked with AQA GCSE Science and analysed all the papers. So I know exactly like how often each topic comes up, how often like the different practicals come up and the different calculations and things like that. Now, I'm not going to use the word predictions today. That's not what we're here for, okay? It'd be crazy to try and predict. And you see a lot of stuff online predicting things. They just don't know. Okay, what we can do though is look at the topics that have come up in the past years and look at how often they've come up and how many marks they carry and the types of questions that you get with them. And what that can do is that can inform us on what is kind of likely to come up. So it's not a prediction, just common sense really, okay? If you know that the exam board kind of puts more marks in for one topic every year than another, then it would make more sense to try and actually just move your attentions when you're revising towards those topics to give you a better chance of actually getting more marks in the exam. Now, there are two sides to this, okay? Now, one is, okay, we can focus our efforts on exactly which topics have come up the most, okay? But the other side is, obviously, you've got to focus on the topics that you're not very good at. All right. And if you find out that you're not very good at one of those really common topics that carry lots and lots of marks every single year, then of course you need to spend more time on that. That's really, really important. Okay. So we're going to look at both sides of the coin today. The first side of the coin is me giving you information about the past topics and the past practicals and things that have come up. But the other side of the coin is Sidekick, because Sidekick can tell you, and this is why I built it, Sidekick can tell you exactly what you're good at and what you're not good at. Okay, and it does this by, as you do a past paper, and of course doing past papers is hugely important for revising, okay? Because of course you work on your recall, you work on flashcards and rewriting your notes and things like that, and that's great. But an exam isn't just questions on recall. It's not like all name this and state that or define this. Or label whatever, you know, there's much more to a GCSE exam than that. And I'm sure some of you have found this out. What we've done, or what I've done, is look at the different question types. There's recall, of course there's recall, and there's lots of it. But there's also lots and lots of what we call here at Sidekick deduction questions. Now that's where you need a little bit of knowledge, but also you're using information from the question to help you answer it. So you have to deduce the answer based on your knowledge and the information you're given, because you've never seen the information they've given you before. You have to kind of think, okay, what do I know about and how does it link to this situation that I've never seen before? And that's really, really important. So deducing the answers to questions and practicing those questions is massively important, because if you just revise on recall alone, then you're only going to be revising for like half the exam, and I will show that to you. In fact, I've put that on TikTok previously, looking at, you know, how much percentage of the marks are given towards recall and deduction and calculations. And we're going to be looking at that again in a bit more depth today, looking at individual topics. And what I'm going to do, there's a lot of data today. Okay, there's a lot of data. Don't panic. I don't want this to scare you off in any way. But what I've done is I've kind of brought out, well, 3 highlights, 3 things you should definitely focus on for each exam, and 2 practicals for each paper that you should focus on. So there's 5 things for each paper that I'm going to give you to focus on. But like I say, that's only half the story. The other half of the story is finding out what you're not good at. So I am going to take 5 minutes just to kind of show you Sidekick, show you what it can do, give you a cheeky little discount code for it if you want. And it's really, really, I've basically priced it so it's kind of like accessible to everybody. Okay, it's not one of those uber expensive things that, you know, I'm not trying to sell you kind of like a subscription or anything like that. If you like it and you fancy it, get it. If you don't and you just find today's information useful, that's absolutely fine. There's no obviously hard sell from me today. So let's get into it because we haven't got long and I want to keep this nice, short and sharp and to the point. Again, if you've got any questions whatsoever, please pop those in the chat for me, okay? And when I see them, I will answer them, okay? So we're going to run through the 6 papers, okay? So what we're focusing on right now is Trilogy, so the combined science where you get 2 grades. We're focused on Trilogy Foundation papers. So if you're doing Trilogy Foundation, this is for you. If you're doing Trilogy Higher, that starts at 3 o'clock. If you're doing Separate Science Foundation, that's at 4. And if you're doing Separate Science Higher, that's at 5. So I'm here for like 4 hours this afternoon, just basically giving you information to help you with your revision and guide your revision, okay? So let's get started, shall we? So like I said, be prepared. There's a lot of information on here, but I included all the information so you know I'm not just making this up, okay? I can show you myself exactly where I've got this information from. So as I say, I've analyzed all these papers and what we've come up with is this data here, okay? So I'm not going to talk through every single slide. I just want to give you on this first one just an idea of what it is that I've looked at, okay? So just zooming in here, let's just make that doable, seeable, whatever, okay, and just move myself out of the way. So we've got all the major topics that have come up in the last 5 years. Now, disclaimer, this does not include 2023 exam data. And the reason for that is because the exam board hasn't released it to the public. So I can't use any of that data in here, okay, because I'd be in breach of like copyright law and things like that. But this is including 2018 all the way up to 2022. So you can see all the major topics that have come up over the years. Now, obviously, these are all the marks in total that these have carried, okay, throughout those 5 years. And then how many times this topic has come up. So if it's 5 times, that means it's come up every single year up to and including 2022. So what I've done is I've taken the total number of marks from all 5 exams in paper 1s, and I've got the number of appearances. So this is the average number of marks, and it could be higher, it could be lower than this each year, but you guarantee it's been in every single year. But what I've also done as well is calculated an importance factor. So I've multiplied the total number of marks that have been for this topic. I've multiplied it by the number of appearances. So the more marks it has, and the more times it appears, that means it's got a bigger importance factor. So at the top, they are the most important topics. So in the darker green here, because it's biology, these are the most important topics that you can focus on. And then, of course, in lighter green, these are the kind of second place, a close second, if you like. And these ones down here are hardly ever appearing. So you got, just once or twice in the last few years. So that's basically the setup of this and how I've deduced and calculated the importance of these topics. Like I said, I'm not just making this up, and it's not just based on like my gut feelings or anything like that. It's actual live kind of real data that I've based this on. The other thing I focused on as well are these different question types. Okay, and that's a really rubbish line, isn't it? Let's do that better. There you go. These question types. So as I say, you've got recall questions where you just need to remember the name of something, label something, remember a definition, okay? Then you've got these deduction questions, which, like I said, you have to work with information in the question, okay? You have to work with information in the question. You can't just remember it. It's using data, using information, and a bit of your knowledge and combining those things. You can see how important that is. It carries almost as much marks as the recall. So like I said, if you're just revising recall and you're not practicing questions and practicing those deduction questions, then you're only revising for like just part of the exam. Okay, so, and I know you guys have got a lot to do, and this is why I'm doing this, because you've got so many subjects, so many exams coming up, and I'm just giving you a focus here, okay? And if you're going to do anything in GCSE science, focus on these things for these papers. So we got recall, deduction, and calculation, and draw plot is basically where you are just asked to draw a graph. Okay, use data and plot a graph. So you don't get a lot of that. You get a lot of it in photosynthesis, apparently. But you can see where all the calculation questions come in for biology. Now, of course, being biology, there's fewer calculations, more recall, loads and loads of recall in biology. So any questions at all, pop them in the chat. But what I'm going to do now is, like, you can see this data. Okay, and if you want to rewatch and have a look at it more closely yourself later on, that's absolutely fine. There's nothing to hide here. But what I'm going to be doing over the next like 15, 20 minutes is actually looking at the things that I've pulled out of this data that I can tell you to focus on. And it's these things at the bottom down here, okay? So the first thing, okay, now this is paper 1, biology, foundation, trilogy. The first thing is recall, especially the top 4 topics. You can see here that actually 51, 37, 26, okay, and 23. So animals, tissues, organs, and organ systems, communicable diseases, there's a lot to remember there, and cell structure and respiration. There's lots and lots of recall questions going to be in your exam on those. So when you're revising using flashcards, so on and so forth, focus on those top 4 topics. Now don't forget, I'm not saying ignore everything else throughout all of this, okay? But I'm saying if you're going to put an extra special effort in on any topics, these are the topics that you want to put the extra effort in, okay? So I'm not saying just revise these, that would be madness, okay? But these are the things that you should focus on. So recall in those top 4 topics there. But of course, with communicable diseases are going to give you lots of data and lots of things that you need to figure out. And there's no substitute for actually just doing past paper questions with that, okay? So this is your classic revision. This is where you should be doing more past paper questions and practicing those past paper questions. And you know what? They do kind of repeat. They're quite similar each year. So once you've practiced a few, you kind of get your eye in and you get better at them. So recall, especially in the top 4 topics, that's where you should focus your kind of hard revision. Next up, microscope calculations. If you look here under the calculations, there's a big 15 there, okay, that jumps out compared to everything else. Cell structure. Now, what does that mean? That means microscope calculations, okay? So know how to work your magnification calculations when it comes to microscopes, and unit conversion, converting between micrometers to millimeters maybe, or centimeters. So just make sure you can do that and it'll make those questions super, super easy. Now the third and final one, working with data, communicable disease. Now I've already just touched on this. This is huge, okay? Now this comes up every single year, and there will be deduction questions. So practice those questions, practice all questions, do whole papers, that's really important. But with communicable diseases, they give you questions giving you data and situations that maybe you've not come across before, and you have to use a little bit of knowledge plus the information in the question to get the answer. So it could be based on malaria, it could be based on like, the HIV virus, okay? So there's lots of different things it could be focused on there in your specification. You've covered them in class, but rather than just remembering, and there is a lot of recall there, but that's only going to get you so far. Practicing those questions, working with data, and Psychic can absolutely help you with that and teach you the tips and tricks in order to get better at answering these deduction style questions, okay? Because normal revision resources, they focus on this. They just give you information. What you're not doing is practicing questions, and that is what's going to get you the best grade you can get when revising, okay? So they're the top 3 things I would recommend for Biology Paper 1. Work on your recall for the top 4 topics there. So tissues, organs and organ systems, communicable diseases, cell structure and respiration. Photosynthesis, pretty hefty as well. But then, of course, you got to focus on microscope calculations because there will be one. And, of course, lastly, working with data on those communicable diseases, okay? Practicing those questions, really, really important. Now, the last thing on this, because we've got loads to get through, in terms of practicals, these are the 2 practicals I recommend that you absolutely smash, okay? Make sure you look at the different practicals on light intensity for photosynthesis, so how you change the light intensity, what you're measuring, and with practicals, it's all about knowing what your dependent variable is, what your independent variable is, and what your control variable is. So be really clear on what those are for all practicals. But photosynthesis, light intensity practical comes up a lot, okay? And the other one is pH and enzymes, okay? So pH and enzymes, that comes up in this a lot as well, okay? So just make sure you're ready for those 2 practicals because, I think one of those 2 is going to come up in the exam. The other thing I've got here, and just a quick mention, average mark for your grades. There's a lot of talk about grade boundaries this year because obviously COVID kind of messed with them and stuff like that. My advice, don't worry about grade boundaries at all. You're in competition with the other students in your year. all right? Not with the exam, okay? So all you need to do is better than the other students in the room, and that's when you get the top grades. Where they put the grade boundaries, like, please don't give that a second thought. So again, any questions you've got, pop them in the chat for me, and I will absolutely answer those for you, okay? So biology paper 1, they're your top things to actually get stuck into. So biology paper 2, obviously laid out in exactly the same way, but what are your top things to focus on? Top things, this time it's the top 3 topics for recall, okay? You can see like these ones here, 35, 27, 26, lots and lots of recall in there, all right? So organization of an ecosystem, so knowing your different trophic levels, pyramids of biomass and things like that. So there's lots of things to recall there, lots of names of things like producer, primary consumer, and secondary consumer, and so on and so forth. Reproduction is massive, okay? There's always going to be reproduction questions in there. Again, there's lots of things to remember the names of, so lots of recall there. And then biodiversity and the effect of human interaction on ecosystems. So knowing what sorts of things we are doing that impact on the environment and how those impacts actually work. So global warming, acid rain, deforestation, all those things, remembering keywords and phrases and being able to label things, very, very important. So recall for the top 3 topics here. Second thing to do, if you want to write these down, please go ahead. Calculating areas. Why have I put that? Because that's a maths thing. Like, why are you putting maths things in my biology revision, Rich? Well, the simple reason is this. Boom. Okay. I say all your calculations. A lot of your calculations are involved with organization of an ecosystem. And what's that? Quadrats, ladies and gentlemen. We love a quadrat, okay? Biology loves a quadrat. So obviously you've got to work out areas in which the quadrat's being used, calculate averages maybe of how many different species appear in a quadrat, and so on and so forth. So calculating areas, calculating quadrats and things like that, massively important for you guys. Now lastly, working with data, okay? Now you can see here that there are, generally speaking, a lot more marks in paper 2. It's less recall and more deduction questions. So that means they're going to be giving you lots of information to work with. You could be able to read a graph or maybe describe the trend in a graph, or just using information from a paragraph and talking about, okay, well, what could this person do differently in order to prevent the spread of, not disease, but, to help the ecosystem and to prevent, deforestation and stuff like that. So in paper 2, there's a lot more deduction. So it's really, really important anyway, but more important for you to actually work on paper 2 questions more, okay? So again, if you want to improve your deduction, then the only remedy for that is doing past paper questions, folks, okay? So they're your top 3 things for paper 3, working with data, but basically exam questions, okay? Lots and lots of exam questions, and you'll get good at them. You will absolutely get good at them. Now the practicals for this one, funny enough, quadrats, that's the second one, but as I mentioned before, they feature very, very heavily in paper 2. So working with populations, measuring populations, working out areas and averages and so on and so forth. But the other most common practical that comes up in this isn't in the top ones. Well, it kind of is, like the human nervous system. Okay, that's one of the top ones. So it's the reaction time practical. Now there are a few different practicals to measure reaction time. Classic one is dropping the ruler and you have to hold it. But again, working with those types of questions, practicing those practical questions, they ask you about errors. What could they have done better in their method to make it more accurate or more reliable? Or what's the independent variable and dependent variable and so on and so forth. So being really clear on what those things are, the different types of errors and working out averages, and obviously working out the different variables in a practical, that's going to really, really help you. And that's where most of these marks are each year, because it's based on the practical, okay? And there's a lot of deduction in practicals because you've maybe never seen it before, and you have to work with the information that they give you. So that's that one there, okay? So if there's no questions on paper 2, if there are any questions on paper 2, then just throw them in the chat and I'll come back. But otherwise, I'm just going to crack on to chemistry. So in biology, there's a really clear cut kind of dividing line between the top most important topics and the less important topics. You can see that here. Chemistry's next. Now, chemistry is a bit weird in that there's a greater number of different topics, and they do tend to spread the topics out over the papers. Okay, there's more of an even spread of topics. So chemistry paper 1 next. You can see there's a lot of this highlighted in yellow. Okay, but I'm going to pull out the important bits for you. So you can see that in chemistry there's less recall compared to biology, but way more deduction questions. So you have to figure things out in the exam using a bit of knowledge. So just kind of revising flashcards and highlighting notes and making mind maps and things is less effective for chemistry. You have to get stuck in and do the papers. So top 3, do some recall work, but especially in these top 3 topics, you can see very clearly these numbers are higher for the periodic table, reactions of acids, and properties of, bonding structure and properties, okay? There's lots of things to learn there. So the periodic table about Mendeleev, basically knowing what atomic number is and mass number, how to calculate numbers of protons, neutrons, and electrons, and pointing out where they are on atoms and things, that's massive. Reactions of acids, there's quite a few equations to remember there. So recall, that's where all those 30 marks are coming from asking you to write the equation for an acid with a base to make a salt and water. And lastly, bonding structure and properties, it's naming things, okay? What type of bonding is in graphite? What type of bonding is in methane or water and things like that? That's where the recall comes in on bonding and structure and properties. The second thing is know how the periodic table works, purely because, of this number, okay? They're going to be working with atomic structure and the periodic table. So knowing that the period numbers represent the number of shells that they have, the group number represents the number of electrons in the outer energy level. So being able to work your way around the periodic table and know how it works, that's really important. I think this is where the Mendeleev thing comes in as well, the fact that he left gaps for elements that hadn't been discovered yet. Now, lastly, equations and calculations, okay? So you can see here, boom, a big fat 25 there for the calculations on chemical measurements, conservation of mass, and chemical equations. So you are asked to do some calculations. So be good at calculating the relative molecular mass, or the MR, as you probably know it, of different compounds. That's really, really important for chemistry. You can see there's a huge number of marks attributed to it every single year. So just be prepared. And if you can do those, then it's easy marks, right? If you can do those, it's easy marks. So they're the top 3 things I would recommend you do for your chemistry paper 1. In terms of the practicals, let's just zoom in on this. The first one is preparation of a soluble salt. So the classic one here is where you've got copper oxide and you're reacting it with sulfuric acid. You dissolve it, well, you not dissolve it, you react it, it turns blue, you keep adding it until there's no more copper oxide disappearing, then you have to filter it and then evaporate all the water off and make your crystals. If that sounds familiar, that's the one I'm talking about, okay? So know how to do that. Again, practice those questions on those and think about variables. And the last one is measuring the temperature change of a reaction. Okay, so they're asking you to use a thermometer and a calorimeter, maybe just measuring the temperature change of a reaction. Maybe it might be an acid and base reaction. It could be, something dissolving, but basically measuring the temperature change of a reaction, thinking about how you calculate whether it's exo or endothermic or anything like that. Okay, so measuring those 2 are the top practicals for chemistry paper 1. So next up, chemistry paper 2, folks. Okay, don't forget, if you've got any questions, then throw them in the chat. This is a bit more clear cut, this. You can see there's a bit less yellow on here, so there's fewer high importance topics. So again, you can see, there's a bit more recall here than deduction. So actually revising, learning the names of things and using flashcards and making mind maps and things. Classic revision is going to help more with paper 2 than it is for paper 1. I know there's lots of information here. Don't worry, guys. You can always come back and rewatch. So, recall, again, especially the top 3 topics. Your top 3 topics are rate of reaction, using Earth's resources and obtaining water, potable water, and then carbon compounds used as fuels and feedstock. There's a lot to learn there, folks, okay, in the top 3 topics. Maybe even the atmosphere, learn your atmosphere as well. But rates of reaction, lots of recall there, thinking about what affects rate of reaction. So temperature, concentration, surface area, lots of recall things there. This one's massive, okay, because almost every year they ask you to compare the different ways of getting drinkable, which is potable water. Okay, what's the process if we get the water from like a spring compared to if we get water from the sea, compared to if we get water from underground or from sewage or something like that. So what are the different processes? There's lots of recall there. So next thing, practice rate practical questions. So lots and lots and lots and lots of practicals for rates of reaction, lots of graph kind of deductions and calculations that kind of go with that. So working on rate of reaction questions is going to be massive for you, and it's going to make the question you get in your exam really, really easy. Now, last one, purity questions. Okay, now I say that because of this number here. Okay, chromatography. So how we separate out things like distillation and using chromatography to separate out different mixtures and filtering and stuff like that. There's going to be like a practical style question associated with those. Be prepared for them. So that's why I'm saying practice purity questions, because like I said, revising for them, only 8 marks for recall. A lot of it is working with information in questions. So doing lots of practice with those purity questions, massively important. Now, lastly, for chemistry paper 2, your 2 practicals are, again, it's all about rates of reaction. This is a huge focus. You can see the massive importance factor that we've got for rate of reaction here, okay? So rate of reaction, practice those practical questions. And secondly, as I mentioned before, in here with purity, chromatography questions, okay? And that's massively, massively important. So that's biology and chemistry done. We are going to fly through something else now. I just want to show you, before we go on to physics and how that's different, I just want to show you inside Sidekick, because essentially this can change the way you revise. It can save you time, and it can highlight exactly which areas you need to focus on. It will tell you what areas you need to focus on, and if that is one of the top questions or top topics that you need to put some more work into. Because you know what, if you get a couple of questions wrong on let's say identification of common gases right at the bottom down here, that's okay, that's easy fixed. They don't come up a lot, so you don't need to worry about it. But if you do a paper and you're like, oh dear, I'm really not good at rate of reaction questions, get good at rate of reaction questions, okay? So over on the Sidekick site, okay, this is what you see. Sidekick.co.uk. It's Sidekick with a C, okay, so SC, so it's like science, sidekick, yeah, all that. So let me just show you, and this is going to be really quick. This is the other side of things and how you find out what areas you specifically need to work on. So you can sign up. It's 25 quid and you get access until the 1st of July. That's all it is. There's a discount code, which I'll give you in a minute, to take it down to 20. So if you go into your members area, there's 2 things you can do, okay? And I'm going to show you very, very quick. First thing is what I call sidekick a paper. I'm going to sidekick a paper today. So I know it's scary sometimes when you think, oh, I just don't feel ready to do a paper yet. I want to do some more revision. Sidekick enables you to start doing papers sooner and with more confidence, because here's why. You click on there, you pick your subject. Well, when you sign up, you say what you're doing. This is separate science higher tier. I know you're kind of foundation and trilogy, but you sign up foundation trilogy and you'll see all your papers here, okay? So if you go down to the one you want to do, let's say I want to do physics paper 1 2018, select it, and then you're just taken straight through to here. So what you see on the left hand side here are all the questions in that paper. All right. On the right hand side, okay, you'll see show clue and show answer. When you're working through a paper, so you start doing a paper, you're working through the questions, and instead of what normally happens is like you get stuck on a question. Like, I can't do that. I just can't remember that. I can't do that. Instead of just skipping it or just having a guess, What Sidekick does is it helps you by training your brain and giving you clues and hints, or maybe giving you an idea of how to structure your answer a bit better. So question 1.1 here, it doesn't list the question because you've got that question in front of you on a paper, and you can download the paper here actually. So if you're stuck on 1.1, boom, you show the clue, and then it gives you some information here about that question, maybe a couple of like memory hooks or something like that, just to help jog your memory. So instead of just skipping a question or looking at the answer, which doesn't really help, this trains you to like, okay, this is a different way of thinking about it. So maybe that's there. Let's say maybe you're working through the paper, you don't need to use it anymore until you get to 4.3. So you get to 4.3, this one's a calculation. You're not sure how to start the calculation, and normally you just have to move on and leave it. But if you show the clue here, okay, what it does is it talks you through it, tells you exactly what to do and how to answer that question. And what will happen next time is when you come across something similar, you'll be like, oh, okay, I know how to do this because Sidekick showed me how to do it in the last one, all right? So it's there all the time waiting for your kind of say-so, and it will give you some help. You can check the answer here as well if you want, okay? It goes through the answer for you and gives you the answer, but you know what? Try not to do that because, of course, you're working on your recall, you're working on your skills. You know, just looking at the answer basically doesn't help, okay? So this is where this bridges the gap, you know, between, you know, just looking at the answer or just skipping it. Now you've got a third option. You can get help exactly immediately when you want it. So that's the first part of Sidekick, and the second part is quite magical. So when you're finished, you mark your paper, okay? And again, it's going to take you through the same paper. It just shows you the answer, and all you need to go is like, okay, I got both marks on that, brilliant. And it'll go to the next one. I got that right, move on. Or I didn't get any marks on that one, click that. And what you do is you just work through your paper. It shows you the answer. You can mark it as you go. Just click the button on how many marks you got for each one, okay? And it will just rack them up. Now, the beautiful thing is this. So if we go to members and we go to my results, and you can mark a paper in here as well, by the way, if you've just done a paper without Sidekick, you go to my results. So this is the one I've just done, okay? I've part done this one, okay? But here's two I've done before. So let's say I've done a biology and chemistry. Now, once you've marked it, because Sidekick knows exactly what topic, what type of question it was, whether it was a practical or not, it will give you a full breakdown of your strengths and weaknesses from that paper. And then you can go, okay, well, I'm not very good at this, so I'm going to work on this. Let me show you. So what do you do now? There's a bit of a thing there, a bit of information. They give you, it gives you a grade, so it knows where you're at. And then, this is chemistry. So there's lots of topics in this, okay? But you can see very clearly what percentage you got for each of the topics in that paper. Okay, so what I would do is I would look at this and go, okay, well, actually, there's 0 out of 6 on this, so I really need to kind of work on my bonding, chemical bonds, ionic, covalent, metallic. So I really need to work on that one. Oh, look, again, bonding, I'm really not very good at that because I got 0% on that. And again, all this bonding is structured, so it can show you very clearly which areas that you need to work on, okay? Any ones with stars, these are the top most kind of examine topics. So if you're bad in any of these, then definitely make these ones a priority. Now, lastly, it tells you how good you are on recall and deduction, okay? So, and calculations. So here, my recall is terrible, okay? So you can match that up with, okay, so it's clearly the learning of terms in bonding and things that I need to get better at to improve my grade, okay? And practical, if there's any practical marks in there, or working with graphs, you can see how you're doing with those as well. So what you would do is you go away and revise a bit. I'd obviously focus on bonding here, and then you do some revision and you do another paper, and then it will give you another readout. And then of course you can go, okay, well, I need to improve on these things, and then do that, and then work on another paper again. So essentially, this is, excuse me, I didn't mean to do that. Essentially, this is a method. It's almost like a hack to find out what your priorities are when it comes to revision, folks, okay? That's really, really important. So that's Sidekick in a nutshell. Thank you very much for listening to that. But, you know, like I said, if you want a discount code, I'll give you that right at the end, all right? So chemistry, let's do physics. Let's end this on a high. So physics now, look at this, okay? there is some recall there. Of course, there's some recall, but just look at all these calculation marks, guys. Now, it just proves what we kind of already knew, that physics is more about the calculations and the maths than it is about anything else. But there's other highlights in here that we can look at. So again, more emphasis on calculations. That means more past paper practice. Just get stuck in on the past papers. So we've got 24, 22, 21, 17. You know, these are the huge calculation topics here, okay? And you'll notice that these match up with energy, okay? And energy. Lots and lots of energy. That's why I've put this in our top 3. But the other thing I've put in there, okay, is this: know your atoms and radiation. Why is that? Because there are just so many marks attributed to different types of radiation, radioactive decay and half-life. So there's a lot of common stuff in chemistry there as well. So knowing your atomic structure, knowing your different types of radiation is absolutely huge. But calculations for energy, okay, energy changes and resistance, okay, so current, potential difference, and resistance is in there all the time. I mean, all of these, okay, are in there all the time. So lots and lots of calculations. Past paper practice is the only way to go with physics. And then lastly, know your energy types, because there's lots of recall here, okay, here. So you need to know your different energy types and the different transfers of energy. You know, if a young boy jumps off the top of a slide and slides down the slide, what energy changes happen? Those typical types of questions. So just make sure you know your different energy types moving forwards. Now, in terms of practical, guys, measuring density. That is a massive one. It comes up all the time. You wouldn't think looking at these top topics, but the practicals are measuring density and, of course, resistance in circuits. Oh, black on black. Can't see that. So you can see here, like these two, a lot of that is practical based. So again, variables and the method and errors that might be occurring in those practicals. So those are the top 5 things in physics paper 1 you should focus on. And then lastly, physics paper 2. So again, you can see this huge emphasis on calculations here, guys. Okay, really, really huge emphasis on calculations. Not so much for waves, but you know, there are lots of other things to look at here. So this one, forces. Know your forces equations, okay? So in terms of calculating a resultant force, knowing the different types of forces, this is the highest number I think we've seen for anything so far. 61 on deduction questions, figuring out what forces are acting on different things. Just forces, forces, forces. Just smash that for paper 2 because there's going to be a lot in there. On average per paper, there is 25 marks. Okay, that is nearly, I say nearly half the paper. There's 70 marks in your paper. On average, 25 of them are on forces. So forces, 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 folks. Be good at wave calculations, okay? Even though, where are we? Oh, there, okay? So waves in air, fluids, and solids. So wave calculations, absolutely massive. Frequency and wavelength, okay, and wave speed. Be good at those. Because again, on average, waves in air, fluids, and solids, that's 10.4 marks on average per exam that's been up in the past. And lastly, know your electromagnetic spectrum, okay? The reason why, look at that, 29 marks. Or 9.6 marks kind of on average for electromagnetic waves, and actually being able to know where the X-rays are compared to UV, compared to visible, compared to infrared. Knowing those is really, really important. Now lastly, last practicals, forces. As I mentioned before, forces, 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 but springs and acceleration seem to be the ones, okay? Let me just highlight that in a different color. Oh, that doesn't work either. Springs and acceleration, massively important, okay, for in terms of practicals. They absolutely love those. And again, measuring waves, that is all part and parcel of what we mentioned before with the waves in air, fluids, and solids. They'll give you a practical, maybe like they shine a light through some waves and you have to time how long it takes a wave to get from one end to the other. So measuring waves is your other major practical. So Thank you very much for your time today, guys. Don't forget, Sidekick is live. That's there. The sooner you get it, the sooner it can start helping you. It doesn't cost you any more to get it now. Like I said, it's not a subscription. What are we looking at? Oh yeah, boom. There you go. So if you put that code in all capitals, revision 20, that'll take 20% off, which basically takes it down to £20 for you. And that £20, you know, it's basically like, it's there when you want it. It's going to coach you through the exams. So the more past papers you do, the better you'll get. And if you're scared about doing past papers, then, you know, Sidekick will be there to kind of help you and be your kind of, you know, little helper on your shoulder, your little sidekick, just to give you clues and talk you through how to answer different types of questions. And you will get so much better, so much more quickly by starting past papers now, and it should really be the main part of your revision for science, guys. Like I said, I've been doing this for 20 years. It's definitely the way forward to get those top grades. And remember, you're in competition with your friends, you're in competition with every student in the country who's sitting that exam this year. So, you know, any sort of kind of leg up, any sort of kind of head start you can get on those is going to make a massive difference to your grade when it comes to August. So any questions, folks, just pop them in the chat. I'm just going to give you maybe 20 seconds or whatever if you've got any questions about like a specific paper or a specific topic. I got 5 minutes. I can give you some information on that. So if you've got any questions at all, pop them in the chat. No one's talked to me so far, but you know, that's okay. Oh, lots of talking. This is only the first one. We've got 2-3 more to do yet. No questions? Okay, right, so I'm going to leave you guys to it. As I say, you can rewatch this video, you can look at the data yourself, pause the video and check out you know, your own get your own kind of conclusions, shall we say? Can't think of words today. Get your own conclusions from those, and that's absolutely fine. But like I said, my top 3 things are the things that I've noticed whilst working through those papers, combined with obviously the data that I've just shown you as well. So if you're going to focus your revision on anything for each of those papers, use those top 3 and use those practicals as well, and that will set you in very good stead for your exams in the summer. So thank you very much for coming along today, guys. I really appreciate it. If you've got any questions about Sidekick, head on over to sidekick.co.uk and just fill out a contact form and I'll get back to you. And that's that. So good luck, those of you that are doing Trilogy Foundation this year. I'm sure you're absolutely going to smash it. Remember, there's never too much pressure on you, okay? Just focus on what you can do, okay? And if you come out the other side, basically knowing that you put some effort in, okay, and you tried your best, that's all good. That's all you can do, okay? So don't worry about grade boundaries. Don't worry about anybody else. These are your exams, and you know, just make sure you take some time for yourself as well and look after yourself. That's really, really important. So, you know, these aren't like the entire world, okay? They're important because obviously you want to do what you want to do next year, but it's not the end of the world, okay? Do what you can do, work hard, rest up, look after yourselves, because you're no good to anybody if you burn yourself out before the exams, okay? So look after yourselves, all the very best for your exams, and if you need anything, you know where I am. I'm over on sidekick.co.uk.